I love learning about armies. I've been running a fair few, and Tau has been a recent addition. So learning as much as I can about them in any form. And so when I see an interesting list that doesn't go along the traditional, in quotes, route of how you might build a Tau list, especially with the current meta, I'm totally drawn to that. And your list does not follow any rule that I understand from any other podcast, reading, friends who play Tau. There was so much in there that arguably doesn't make sense, but obviously worked, because I think you took, was it 7th, I think, in total? Like,
yeah,
at Manchester, which is, firstly, congratulations. That was really cool. So it was an opportunity. I'd love to talk about your list, talk about how your games went and your points you were deciding on what to bring, and also the fact you're running Farsight Enclaves without Farsight, which again to me just sounds like that's so out there.
Well, I mean, obviously, as Warhammer players, like, we love to just tinker with lists. So I think I would definitely make some changes going forward. Even though I did fairly well, you always go back. You're like, that unit didn't perform, or I'd like to try that out. And funnily enough, I do want to go back to Commander Farsight, because I did play him in almost every event I played before Arcs. And I kind of missed him. He's just a very cheap commander that gives a lot and also can catch people out. 'Cause I've had him in the past when I played him. I've had him finish off demon princes in combat, finish off bloodthirsters in combat. It's kind of surprising for people. But yeah, so I mean, the crux of the list is obviously the 3 Riptides.
I say, should we go through the entire list if that's all right?
Yeah. However you want to do this, that's absolutely fine. Yeah.
That's all right. I've got it listed here, so if it's easier for me to run through it, or if you have it from memory.
You want to do that? Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, firstly, so in the list you had a Fireblade, who had the Exemplar of Kayon, so you had the nice redeploy ability.
Yeah.
You also had the Stratagem Relic on him to give him the advanced EM Scrambler, so nothing can be placed within 12 inches of him during initial deployment, and also if they come in later on, which I imagine is quite useful against various amount of armies. 2 Coldstars with 1 marker drone on each, no relics, which to me is really interesting because there was no gauntlet and there was no flamer shenanigans going on. And also you didn't give them an extra upgrade each, which, obviously it worked, but I still kind of find that quite fascinating. Then one had the precision, which is the quite not standardized, but I think a lot of people taking precision as the warlord trait on him, and obviously the secondary one of the Master of Killing Blow, which I haven't seen a lot, but I think that's also partly because most people who are running Farsight aren't necessarily bringing another model that can have that one. So that was interesting. In troop side, you didn't have any recruits. You had a Breacher team and the Fire Strike team, who obviously are giving you a fair amount of markers there, I assume. A huge one in here, which is the one that shocked me the most, was the 2 Crisis Suits units of only 3 in each one, with 1 shield drone, no marker drones. The cheapest chips with the I can't pronounce it properly, but the Schaus Vray, leader of that group, having a target lock along with everyone else, not any stim extras, no shield protectors, nothing extras. Honestly, I find that so fascinating. Riptide there, which I have to say I adore. That's one of the reasons I've started really getting into Tau. I love the idea of just bringing in 3 big suits. The one only difference, I mean, to be honest with you, I think how you had them built there is how I've kind of been building them myself, with 2 with the ions and 1 with the, I'm going to get the name of it wrong. Where is
Burst
it?
cannon.
Thank you, Burst Cannon. I'll delete that bit. One with the Burst Cannon. And also going for the early warning override. Van Tactics guy doesn't bring that one, he brings another option. And then 2 Devilfish, I'm assuming, to run around your breaches and strike team. So essentially, I think I've covered a few bits in there that I find really interesting. One for me is like how you were moving those teams around. Secondly, how you managed to go with small crisis suits with much less protection than appears in many other armies. And then after that, also the two commanders where they're not in their basic form because they still had a lot. I mean, that you had high outburst cannons on them, a missile pod, plasma rifle, and another burst cannon. I suppose the one I'd question on that one is the missile pod, purely because other people are bringing the line of sight pieces or flamers, as I said earlier. So, yeah, please take it away. I'd love to learn more about this and how you decided to come together with this army.
Essentially, the list, as you read it, and you picked out like very correctly, like there's things missing, things that you would expect. The list is a very trimmed down version. I took everything, like the Coldstars are only 175 points with the drone. They're extremely cheap. If you wanted to take the Flamer Relic or the or the Ignores Line of Sight gun, the Airburst it is, or one of the other prototype systems, they start really racking up points. And I just thought I was trying to go for a more MSU approach, especially as with 3 Riptides, you don't have a lot of points left over for that stuff. And crisis teams are also quite expensive now. Even the three-man one, the points changes have changed some things. The rationale behind the missile pods was that I thought it would be a lot better now going into what was it called? Armor of Contempt gone. So -2 guns are actually a lot better now. They were fairly good. The missile pods. They what was nice was sometimes I could keep the commanders back and just range shoot the plasma and the missile. You don't always need to fire every gun, especially a lot of good players hide everything very well. So just having a few extra shots on that one dreadnought that you can see to kill it turn 1 can really matter. At least that's what I found. So I like the Coldstars, but like I said a second ago, I would probably go back to actual Farsight just because he's a hell of a lot cheaper and potentially can bring more punch. He can literally punch people in combat.
Yeah, he's saving about 45 points. We're just having him now, but yeah.
Yeah, the only thing about that is I only have 4 marker lights on my list, which is the 3 marker drones and the Fireblade brings one.
Yes.
And sometimes that felt like a little bit little because sometimes you want at least that number, maybe a little bit more for the Riptide long range shooting. For example, my last game I played against Chris Kinnear with Space Wolves had a really good Space Wolf list with loads of the new Desolators, loads of long fangs, and he just sort of wanted to sit there and shoot me. But obviously he has to see me with the big missiles.
Yes.
And I needed some marker light hits against that unit to actually kill a decent amount. So I had a turn where I kind of had to split some drones off here to like make sure I got a line of sight with the marker lights there, and it was kind of tricky. And in the end, I did manage to kill the big unit, which was really helpful. But if I didn't have those marker lights, I think I definitely wouldn't have been able to kill them. So I think going forward, more marker lights might be a bit more safe, but it's whether you have the points to do that.
Yeah, so that's an extra 10 points each time. It's it's useful, but it does hurt and take away from other areas.
Yeah, and especially if you're fiddling around with other things, then yeah. So obviously the Fireblade is as you explained it. He's got the redeploy. He brings a marker light and a marker drone. He's got the no deep strike thing within 12 inches. That I sometimes wonder if that's even worth it because you're already kind of spread out enough controlling the board with Tau that when he's at the back doing that, it's rarely come into play. I think it only came into play 1 game against Grey Knights.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I kind of put him forward actually so that he could screen forward on an objective, which was quite helpful.
Quite a big stretch because it's 12 inches, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, really, the only reason was we've got a lot more command points now in ARCs, so I thought, might as well. I'll give it on him. I might as well. I think going back, I would probably put the gauntlet on the precision of the hunter guy as well, maybe. Just to have something running around to just punch that lemon rust or something like that out of nowhere, which is pretty cool.
So you might potentially swap that CP around so you wouldn't have that relic instead, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something that I would think about.
But how was
Obviously,
how was the redeploy on his one? Did that come into action a few times?
that's obviously really important. That's one of the main things about the list. Is it's not even the actual redeploy. It's the, for example, I had an Imperial Guard opponent who, when we were deploying, he was like, "Oh, you can deploy up to three units, redeploy up to 3 units. That's your 3 Riptides." I said, "Yeah, that's right." He's like, "Oh, I need to hide these tanks then," and he deployed them a lot more defensively than he probably should have. And then I actually went, "Okay, I won't redeploy anything actually because I don't think I need to." I mean, I think I maybe moved a few units here and there, but I think the redeploy is really important to the list, even just like making
the threat was enough.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, if you do play against someone, there was, I saw somewhere, I think he came, I can't remember where he placed. I think it was in the top 12 or something. There was a friend of mine, David, running double Astraeus, the big super heavy tank. Obviously, if you play against something like that,
Oh, he played against someone I joined in a chat who does yeah. His first game was against her, and I remember she was talking about the list and just going, "What is he doing? Like, why is he bringing this?" Yeah, I mean, obviously it did really well, but it just it's not when you first think of it, you don't think, yeah, 2 of those is the way forward. That's the
But like against that, you have to have the redeploy to put the Riptides behind the big L.
yeah.
Or if you have the turn 1, deploy them forward with the redeploy, so you can actually shoot and maybe kill an Astraeus turn 1, because that is huge if you can manage to kill one, obviously. But I think they fly, so your velocity tracker works against them and all that stuff.
So are you often deploying quite heavily forward, and then if you needed to, just bringing back the 3 Riptides, or were you bringing back other units and leaving maybe 1 Riptide hidden, or?
It was almost always the Riptides being redeployed, because the other units were almost always screened or hidden. I don't really care about the troops and the Devilfishes. They're always at the front, because at most games they would go forward and do 2 relays turn 1. And obviously those units are actually very important in this meta, because Kroots, as good as they are, and you do miss them, are just really rubbish into those Desolator Marines that wipe them off the table turn 1 with the ignores line of sight shots. So you need the Devilfish actually to have your troops in, so that if you lose the turn 1 against the Space Marines with the ignores line of sight firing, they don't just wipe your troops off for free.
That's really, I never thought of it like that. That's a really good shout. Yeah,
it's really important actually, and Kyle said the same thing. Who's the, like you mentioned, the ex-Vanguard Tactics style guy.
That's Kyle. Thank you. The name was there and it just wasn't.
Yeah, Kyle's a great player, and he was absolutely right. Yeah, the Devilfish is just really, and Devilfish isn't even a bad unit. It's quite tough for a transport. It's toughness 7, 13 wounds, and it has 16 shots. It can boost forward, drop off the Fire Warriors who do a relay, and then I had it boost forward and kill a couple of Skyclaws in my last game.
Oh, really?
And then, yeah, I mean, it was not a whole unit, obviously.
But more than you'd expect a transport to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of shots. It's not that squishy. They have to commit something to kill it. They were very good all tournament. Even just, I mean, obviously, I think I was always aggressive with them. They were never hanging back. And just clogging up the middle of the board with, it's quite a big model as well. Just clogging up the middle of the board like that with a transport, I think is really important. But mainly having your troops inside that turn 1, so you don't get bombarded by those Desolator Marines, I think is really, because they're everywhere now. I played my round 1, I played against it. My round 5, I played against it. I saw them. I think all top 4 lists played them in the end. Yeah, they're very, because they do everything. Yeah, just some big combos.
Everyone was making fun of them when they originally launched, and now everyone's got them.
They do look silly, but the main thing is that in some lists you can buff them quite a lot. So my last round opponent, Chris, again with Space Wolves, had some chaplain prayers that he could put on them that made them hit and wound Riptides on 2s, which was a little bit crazy. And just, yeah, they can just do that. And he had a big 10-man unit, which I think was really important to his list, how he could buff that whole unit. And if I had 2 units of Kroot, they would have been off the board turn 1. I mean, obviously Kroot are a little bit cheaper, so you can potentially play more of them. But I think Fire Warriors, especially if you're going for relays, which every game I went for the aerospace relays secondary, just going forward and doing 3 relays turn 1, because you do 1 at the back with the Fireblade, obviously, who's definitely not turn 1, and then you do 2 on the side with the Fire Warriors. Can it's not necessarily something you need to do, but against some players they might think like, oh wow, he's already scored 9 points turn 1 effectively. I need to go forward and I need to be aggressive now, so to stop him scoring more. And I think that game plan is quite nice to have, especially when you do have turn 1. People are quite good at hiding their armies nowadays, with the terrain that these armies have. Quite often you don't really have anything to shoot very well. A Riptide might have one Riptide might have an angle or something. I don't know, but even then you might not kill it. So just being able to go forward and do some secondary game is quite nice.
It's also nice getting that ahead a little bit when you come in and be like, I've already got this many points. Come on, you got to challenge it. Yeah. So I know. I think... No, please.
Sorry. I was just saying that, as I said before, it's like some people will think like, oh, he's already scored so many points, I need to go and do something as well. And then it makes them overcommit, and then you can shoot them off the objective.
And suddenly you got 3 Riptides shooting them down, yeah. So interesting, I know it's only like a 5-point difference, but in that discussion then of Croots, absolutely. So they're going to be 70 points, and you're looking at your Breacher team being 15 more, and your Strike team being 10 more. Did you find that one of those teams was doing more than the other? Only thinking that we were saying, Carl, he brought 2 Breacher teams, and you also obviously had a Strike team instead. Was one doing any different? And so you might make a change in the future, or they did have a benefit to each of them?
Well, I think only once did it come into play that the Strike team had this really long range and they could finish off a few Grey Knights on an objective across the board. But I think in general, if you have the points, and I didn't really have the points, I think in a future list I would definitely play the double Breacher team. The double Breachers, they can really inflict some damage close range. With all you can even buff them up for all the strats like the reroll wounds from what's it called? Breach Enclave, I think it's called, the stratagem, where they can get out the Devilfish and just blast some Space Marines off an objective. I actually even had the Breachers on one side of the board finish off the last 3 wounds of a Dread Knight, a Grand Master Dread Knight actually. Because they're, at close range, they're strength 6, -2, 2 shots each. Only 1 damage, but if you get to Callion as well, they're exploding 6s. They're +1 to hit because you're Farsight within 9 inches. So they can actually, shooting, they're almost like a squad of Space Marines with good guns.
So it was more that kind of like, even though it's only 5 points, 5 points is everything. It does make a massive difference. So it was more just that element there.
Yeah, and I think going forward, I would try and fit 2 Breacher teams in. But the Strike team still, it's quite often in some games, they would just boost forward, do the relay, and then kind of die after that. So it didn't matter too much. But I think if you do, you can, and if you use them aggressively enough, you can really threaten people with Breachers. You can, because I'm quite upfront about what I can do in the games, and I would say to my opponents,
I think that's good though. Yeah.
The Breachers can move up to 36 turn 1 if I go Montka. And they're like, oh, how? Well, you got your pre-game move from being Montka, 12 inches, then you move with the Devilfish 12 inches more, and then you do disembarkation stratagem to get out 9 inches from the Devilfish, and then you can advance because you've got an assault weapon and still potentially shoot. I mean, you probably rarely do that, and I can't think of a scenario.
No, but you're being honest and saying you can, yeah.
Yeah, you can. So don't leave your character in the middle there or something is what I'm saying, because it's 10 shots, strength 6 -2. They can probably kill some characters that way,
That's so like nice the lion standing there and instantly taking him out.
That would be nice. I mean, they could probably kill the lion, actually, thinking about it.
That'd be such a great story at the end of a game, just being like, well, turn 1.
Yeah, that's game winning if that happens, obviously. But yeah, so I think the Strike team was still good. They did their job. But I think if you have the 5 points, it's nice to play double Breachers. Yeah.
So I'll go back through to the Crisis, because that to me is a really big one. And I know we have covered that you would bring Farsight, but your current Coldstars that you had, I'm still fascinated. Was it purely a points thing that there wasn't the extra? I think it's DW02 burst gun and those kind of things. I know you said you were trying to keep them low down, but there was nothing like, I don't know, pull out one of the Devilfish and make the one of the breacher teams just have to run for it.
I
So
mean,
try and squeeze that in.
yeah, the logic was to be cheap, and obviously if you're adding a DWO2, I think that's 20 points or 25 points.
That one's 15, and then I think the big flamer guy is like 25 or 20. Yeah, I guess they're very similar areas.
Yeah, I mean the thing about the flamer guy is in my opinion, he's not really worth it unless you can put it on an enforcer battlesuit who can actually charge into combat and be annoying.
And survive there, yeah.
Because if a Coldstar charges into combat, he's dying because he's got 3+ armor save. You know, he's not very tough unless you somehow give him a solid image projection unit or something like that. And even then, in this day and age, looking at what's in there in the combat armies, you know, Khorne or they will kill him. He will still die. So the flamer didn't feel worth it for me. I mean, in previous lists when you could take 3 commanders, he was definitely worth it. But now that you can only take 2, you're a little bit more tight for space. And I think Coldstar is really important to take anyway, because you have to have this threatening teleporting guy who can also buff your crisis suit unit to move 18 inches, who moves a lot himself. And he comes with a free target lock, which I think is quite important. A lot of people forget that. A lot of people forget that the enforcer doesn't come with one. So having that for free, yeah. I mean, obviously, if you have the points, it would be nice to put an extra gun, as in the DRGO2 or something like that on him. But
I know it's tricky with the point thing. It's just a case of like if you dropped one Devilfish, I know we're saying that then wouldn't protect that team. It's just 95 points. It is. Yeah, it's those little picks, isn't it? It really changes it. Which I suppose leads us to the crisis suits, because so my list whenever I've put something together for crisis suits has always been a 5-man block, and then if I can squeeze it, another 3-man block to try and like have that base core. They can walk around and follow the commander and keep kind of keep them safe. The fact you had 2 3-man blocks. One really intrigued me, as I said earlier, because as I said, everything I've read has always been like, have the 5, and then if you can do more, then great, go that route.
Obviously, the logic behind being 3-man in the list originally was, like I said before, to be cheap. I wanted. I remember a few months ago, I watched a really cool battle report online on what's the channel? War Games Live. Of Andrew Gonyo playing against a Tyranid player, and he was playing a tower list very similar to what I played, but obviously not Arcs of Omen. This was old, in Nephilim. I think it was Nephilim. Was the previous one? That's
the last one. Yeah, in
Nephilim, and it was what I'd call MSU Tau. So it had no big crisis brick. It just had lots of small units like little breaches and things like that. Quite similar. Not exactly the same, but obviously quite similar to what I played. And I thought I'd give a list like that a try because it seemed quite well placed versatility-wise. So yeah, the logic behind the 3-man units was to be cheap, but also because we have more command points now, I thought I can take advantage of the drop to and clear stratagem, which is the Farsight stratagem that gives the real hits and wounds when they deep strike down. So quite often in the games, every game I at least deep strike one, and in some games I deep strike both units.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
I thought, honestly, assumption would be you'd not hide them, but keep them with a commander and the other one with a commander, and then they would be behind a wall and then make their way forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I did in I can't remember how many games. I definitely deep striked at least one unit every game, but some games I deep strike both units. I think my first game I deep strike both units. And then I forgot about them. They didn't come in until turn 3. I've
done that.
Yeah, it's like my opponent also forgot about his deep strike, so it didn't really matter. We both forgot our deep strikers. But anyway, so having that CP first intrigued me. I was like, okay, well I can have a unit coming down every turn, or at least for 2 turns, having 4 wheels, hit and wound. That's pretty good. It might do something. And it was good. I don't know if I play 2 3-man units again. I think the big brick that, like you said, you favour, and I've always played the big brick in the past before Arcs. That might actually be stronger, just because if you play against the Dark Angel Terminators, you need this big unit you can buff up to.
It eats up so many points, though. So that's I think was, yeah.
But 2 3-man units, I think, is actually more expensive than the 1 big man 5-man unit. So I might have made a bit of a mistake there. They were still very good. So, in a lot of games, the 3-man units, they can be quite small. You can fit them into places for deep striking, and just when your opponent's already dealing with 3 Riptides and knowing that, also next turn there's this crisis unit coming in that's going to be rerolling. They're like, that's really annoying. But yeah, that was the original.
You said you made a mistake there, but not to sound silly, to reiterate the point, you came 7th at Manchester with a huge run of people, top tower player. You did very well.
Thank you, but I think something that I'm always trying to think what I could do better. I think in a tournament like that, to do well, you also you do have to be a bit lucky, not only with the dice but also with pairings. And I think if I had for matchups, I might have had a bit of more of a struggle to go 5-0. I didn't actually play against Dark Angels in the end, which were kind of the bogeyman going into the tournament. So I don't know. So yeah, I think the list that I played was very good, but I think I always want to try and tweak and optimize a little bit and try and get even better. I mean, obviously it can depend on the tournament. You might show up optimized for Dark Angels and there's no Dark Angels there, which is like... But I think in a big tournament like that, you can be fairly safe to assume that there's going to be these big meta armies that people are expecting. Obviously there were an absolute ton of Space Marines at this tournament. I think you saw that the top 8, there were only 2 armies that weren't Space Marines, which was me and Vic playing Eldar.
I mean, the top 4 that went through were all Space Marines. So
all Space Marines. Yeah, all Space Marines, all fairly similar. Well, no, the Iron Hands was a bit more shooty, actually, I think. But they all kind of do the same thing. Those Space Marine lists, they're very cheap. They all have free war gear, and they have a lot of shooting and also some decent combat.
Well, we're gonna get the new FAQ very soon. We'll see if the free war gear sticks.
I do wonder because the last opponent that I played against, Chris, I was just looking at his list at one point. I was like, back in before Arcs, this list would be rubbish because they're just normal Space Wolf squads. But now every Space Wolf squad has 5 melters, a Thunder Hammer, a Power Fist, and it's like, wow! I can kill 3 of those squads, and you've still got 3 more coming at me with 5 melter guns each. It's like, wow, okay. Yeah, I think against lists like that, it's Riptide's really won me the game against those lists.
So on the Riptides, I'm curious because I've been experimenting and actually extremely similar. I was inspired by another game from War Games Live. This was back previous edition where it was actually a Tau versus Tau game I saw that I found so fascinating because it was almost like watching chess, where they were having to be they almost could tell who was going to win by the very first roll because they know each other's armies so well. But the fact you had 2 ions and the burst cannon, what was the inspiration for you behind that?
So originally, obviously, the burst cannon, I think everyone at first thought when Armor of Contempt was one was like, oh, burst cannon is obviously a lot better now because there's no longer this Armor of Contempt flowing around, making my burst cannon only -1. And it was good. So it was very good when I played against standard Primaris Marines, such as the Desolators. I think I had at one point, I didn't overcharge the cannon. I just shot it with 12 shots base into a unit of Desolators with a Marker Light, and I think I killed half the squad, which is very good. That's good. That's a good result. So it's really good against that. But the only thing about the burst cannon is it's obviously not as good as the iron into things like Terminators. So it's I think you can play either. I think if you really want to be really safe and versatile, actually playing 3 ion is probably better. But the burst cannon does open up exactly, and it opens up having a good shooting phase into something like the Desolators. So when you shoot, when someone leaves out a bunch of Primaris Marines out in the open, you just think, that's perfect for my burst cannon. Actually, I had this against my 4th round opponent with Grey Knights. The burst cannon is amazing there because they're all just 2 wound, 3 up save people. So they're gonna, every time the burst cannon shoots, it's gonna mop up a whole squad of Grey Knights, or in effect. So yeah, I think the burst cannon is actually playable now, which is really nice because before in Armor of Contempt it wasn't really. you would shoot into Marines and kill like 1 or 2. So it's a lot nicer now. And it's better into other things potentially, you know, like Eldar or something like that.
Of course.
Um,
Sisters and Guard. And,
Guard especially, actually, yeah. But, you know, the Iron is still amazing. Iron is still having a damage 4 shot at 72-inch range, which is, I think, the cool thing about it.
Corner to corner, like...
yeah. Just knowing that the opponent can't outrange it. Well, the burst cannon they potentially can outrange because it's only 36. Is yeah.
It's still not likely, but definitely 72 just makes it impossible, really.
Yeah. So, like, you know, I think the burst tides, I almost think of them as identical because while the burst cannon one is potentially better against some things, sometimes I felt like, I actually just wish this was an ion. But on other games, yeah, it was like, I wish this was a burst. So I think it's something you have to judge for yourself in wherever you play, or, you know, and I was trying to cover all my bases for a big tournament like this. So yeah, I like the burst tide. I think I would probably still play 1 burst cannon Riptide, but it's definitely fine to play 3 iron. The only benefit of the burst cannon is it's 10 points cheaper, so you get to fit in an extra market.
Yeah,
so really nice.
Absolutely. One thing I noticed on them was, and some other lists of tau that have been out there, is some people have been taking away the shield drone to save on, I think it's going to be 45 points total by having it on 3.
Yeah.
Did you find they were necessary, or were they were just there for like peace of mind?
I think they can actually win you games. So, in my opinion, the Riptide wins you 1 game of tournament with shield drones just by you spiking saves. Because it's a 4+ save, right? So it's 50-50. You can get lucky. You can spike your saves.
The old Harlequin
Exactly.
way.
Yeah, so you make like 3 or 4 in a row, and your opponent at 3 or 4 against something like, you know, a missile or something like that, and your opponent is like, wow, I did 0 damage. So having the shield drone there, I think is actually really, really important. And I wouldn't like to play a Riptide without a shield drone. Just having extra drones around the board as well, you know, late game, splitting a drone off, taking an objective as well. There's something to be said for that. The shielded missile drone is quite tough by itself. You know, it's got 4+ invuln, and it even shoots. You know, like the 2 shots at strength 7 -2, 2 damage nowadays is with no AOC again. It can kill a Marine quite easily. It can kill that last Marine on the objective. So yeah, I think it's definitely worth the 15 points on the Riptide. I would say so.
That's cool. No, it's just some lists you've seen recently, they've kind of been taking those away to try and squeeze other bits in. So I was just curious. Something as a comparison to Kyle's list and some others again were the addition of Croot Hounds. Obviously a points thing, totally understand. But do you see if you had the spare points? I think most people are bringing 8 of them, so 2 groups, which is going to be 48 points, I think. If you had that kind of point spare, do you think you'd be putting it on Croot Hounds to run to objectives, or are you more likely to spend those points on more marker drones, more shield drones, etc.?
For me, in the current climate, it would probably be more drones, and that's purely because of those Desolator Marines. I think Croot are amazing, and I've always said, and I actually missed Croot at this tournament because I've always played Croot, and I was like, I'd love to have some Croot here to do the pre-game move and do that stuff and be annoying and so on. But just with these Desolator Marines running around, you have 1 squad of Croot, and especially Croot Hounds, they will just die turn 1, and it's a free target for the Desolators. They'll be like, they'll be licking their lips as soon as they see that deployed. I think if you're going to play Croot now, I think you have to reserve them against Marines. So if you play against stuff like, not Marines, so that's, you know, or not Imperial Guard as well, because you have to remember that there's also Imperial Guard with all the mortars and everything like that. That can clear Croot off pretty well with the ignores line of sight shooting. But if you play against not those armies, so thinking like Eldar, demons especially, Croot are really good into demons.
Yeah.
You can deploy them, but against those armies, I think with how Arcs now lets you reserve stuff for free, and just have it walk on, I think that's actually really important against armies like that. And I actually saw that, I hate to talk about another game, but I saw a really awesome game, round 5 of Vic against Alex Petford. Vic Vijay versus Alex Petford. Vic was playing Eldar and a very almost Footdar list, you know, While Alex was playing kind of the Bogeyman, Dark Angels, all the Desolator Marines, and so
Never,
on.
never heard the term footdar. I love it.
I think it's an old term from Fifth or something like that.
Cool. I really like it.
But so one would think that footdar would kind of be destroyed by the Desolator Marines, but Vic was really clever. I didn't see the whole game, but I was told that he reserved almost his whole army, or anything that could actually be a soft target for the Desolator Marines, and then just kind of walked on and shot the Dark Angels down, which I think is a really good game plan if you have things that are squishy against those Desolator Marines, is to actually reserve them. So I think if you play crew, you're going to have to do that. Otherwise, I personally wouldn't play crew at the moment, even though I love them. I would just play more drones.
No, that's really good thinking. Yeah. So the last couple I kind of wanted to cover with you. We've gone through like your list in and out, and so I really appreciate it. I suppose would be who did you have a unit that you were keeping on your home objective safe? Like, so you're saying about the keeping your Fireblade back at the beginning. Where was your positioning for him, and who was taking a home objective? And the other one I'd really love to cover was how did you find that warlord trait of the Master of Killing Blow, the Farsight one? Did that come into effect a lot? Only because it's not seen very often.
Yeah. So let's talk about the warlord trait first. So I definitely wouldn't take it again. It did barely anything all tournament. I thought originally that I might see lots of Angrons or something like that, and it didn't really do anything all tournament. I think a few times it was like, oh, I've got an extra 3 AP on my shots there. That's really nice, but I think it's not worth the CP. I definitely wouldn't play Master of Killing Blow again. It didn't really do anything. So yeah, it's safe to say that is. I mean, the thing is, it potentially can. If I had played against, something where I could just snipe that -1, because remember it also ignores -1 damage and things like that. Yeah, potentially. I mean, I did actually play against Death Guard, but the thing is, I think it finished off a Plague Burst Crawl or something. So maybe it's unfair to say it did nothing, but I think it's not worth playing in a
in comparison of it.
Yeah. So that kind of covers that. The keeping stuff on back objective, yeah, that was always the Fireblade. That was kind of the purpose of the Fireblade originally. Was he's a cheap body who can sit at the back, because that was sometimes a struggle in previous lists, when you just had the Crisis, 3 commanders and a couple of Riptides, and obviously the planes have gone. We used to always play the Sunshark bombers. That was a struggle previously. You'd have to keep like Farsight back, or keep a commander back, or hold the Crisis team at the back for a little bit. So having that,
have one hound group is the cheapest thing, but yeah, even then, as you said, it's so difficult to keep them alive.
Exactly, yeah. So the benefit was, I mean, quite often I'd deploy. He'd be right at the back, obviously, or maybe slightly forward on the objective, and then there'd be a Riptide right in front of him, so he was screened with a Riptide. So yeah, I think he was well worth his points, just having that there, and also giving me the redeploy trait. I think once he shot, because he's actually got a damage 2 pulse rifle. That's -2, so he can actually finish off a Marine or 2 on an objective, which is pretty cool. It almost never came up, but it's quite nice to threaten it sometimes.
It's nice to have, really, and if he comes with it anyway, then why not?
Yeah, I mean, he's cheap as well. I think for what he did in the list, he was well worth the points.
That's interesting, because I thought you were going to bring him more for kind of boosting up some of the squad teams. It gives them extra bits, but yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Because I know, was it Kyle brought I can't remember the name of it now. Shapeshifter, is that the one? Is the Crew?
Oh, the Crew Shaper.
Yeah,
I think
that's the one.
I think that's also absolutely fine to bring. I think actually why I bought the Fireblade was also because he could bring a marker drone with him, and I was trying to spread my, instead of having 2 marker drones on a commander, having 1 on each to be a little bit more spread. I think there's benefits to both. I think the Shaper is also, especially if you want to trim down on points, is fine. But yeah, the Fireblade has a few little bonuses, yeah, I think he's worth it. I think you do want at least one of them in the list nowadays to sit on the back objective, to screen your backboard, to not be shot as well. Because, like you mentioned before, in the old days, you could bring a crew unit to do that. Nowadays, they're probably going to be shot off the board turn 1 by those Desolator, or by Imperial Guard.
So was his advanced EM scrambler like worth it for you in the end? Then do you think?
In this tournament, not really. I think I said that in the Grey Knight game it kind of mattered.
Yeah, we said. I remember you saying on one it did. I was just curious again, like being on that back. In my head, I didn't understand he was at the back at that point. I wasn't wondering whether he kind of run him up with the other teams. So yeah.
So yeah, interesting enough, you're right. You know, like against the Grey Knights, I did kind of run him forward. Not like literally run him forward, but he was kind of at the front of my castle. Because my rationale was like, okay, he's not going to deep strike within 12, and even if he does like walk within 12 meters, if he wants to charge a Fireblade, that's fine by me, because then I can shoot whatever he's killed the Fireblade with. I don't really care after that. But yeah, so he was with the Scrambler anyway. It didn't make that much of a difference in the games, except the Grey Knight game. But I think if you have the command points, you know, it is worth it. Just taking, just in case you play against demons, or you play against, you know, I can't really think what else. Deep strikes a lot at the moment.
I mean, Thousand Suns still the duplicity. There's, you know. Sure.
Yeah. Thousands. I didn't see a lot of Thousand Suns at that event.
No. I think with their hits recently, they went away. But I'm hearing rumours of more people bringing them back for other reasons. So we'll see how that turns out.
I think they're still good. I think they're still a good army. I think the only problem with this event and also the previous event, UKTC event at Southampton, was people are kind of want to bring their new toys, you know. And that's the thing about Warhammer, right? Something gets changed or something gets buffed or some new unit comes out and you're probably going to see more of it. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, your list is going to get a lot of eyes on it with Farsight now, big new one coming out in time of recording this coming Saturday.
It's annoying that there's no new rules for Farsight. I think they confirmed that.
Yeah, there's no rules, but they're going to, I mean, in like 3 months, there's a whole new edition, so he'll be buffed then anyway.
That's true, yeah. Yeah, that new Farsight model is really awesome. I was really annoyed about that actually, because they had pre-orders on the Saturday of the tournament at 10 a.m. And I forgot to set an alarm, and it got to midday just after I finished my first game, and I was like, oh, I need to pre-order, and it was already out of stock after 2 hours, so I missed it. Yeah. And obviously they're going second hand now for like £80 or something ridiculous.
Really?
You know, people are trying to scalp. I think it's yeah. So we'll see. I'll definitely pick one up eventually. But
yeah, I mean he'll come out as his own model at some point. So
yeah, definitely. It's such a cool model. They have no reason not to redo it. You know.
No. It'll be with the new rules. 10th edition he launches and they'll be like mega just.
yeah. That's true.
So if cool, I just want to finish up with two more things. So one would be your recommendation on the starting CP. I know in this game you started off with 2 CP. You know, is that your base? You always want to start there, or would you prefer to be starting with more just because of what you can do with that? I know your redeploy is free, so some armies have to, you know, Eldar have to leave 2 for the redeploy. And also, we've covered a few things that you might do some changes of, but if you had, you know, dream changes, don't worry about the extra 20 points here and there, because once you get down to nitty gritty, you know, what elements would you adjust?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Well, command points, I think you can actually start with less. A lot of the time, I would get to the point where I had 4 or 5 command points, and I was like, you know, maybe I should have spent them already. I think if you're going to start with 2 like I did, in hindsight, I probably would have been a bit more aggressive with some shooting. I might have actually re-rolled just wound rolls or re-rolled hit rolls or things like that. But I think it's fine to start with less. Absolutely fine. I think maybe I would add like the gauntlet on one of the commanders or something like that. Because the thing about Tau is, unless you're going for a really aggressive play with breaches, you tend not to spend command points early game, because the only time you start to spend them reliably is at the end when your Riptides are damaged. You're using the branch and overcharge and
putting them back up to their full.
Yeah, exactly. So I started with 2 originally because I thought that I'd need a lot for the drop zone clear with the crisis. But like, yeah, that brings me on to what I change about the list is actually I would probably go back to playing 1 big unit of crisis suits. So not playing the 2 3-mans, which means you don't need the drop zone clear anymore, so you can probably drop some command points as well. And the reason for that is I just felt that against good players, they almost never let you capitalize with these little 3-man units very well, up and down. Whereas the mind game of having this big crisis unit, because you've normally got them behind the middle, ruin, controlling the middle of the board. If there's any space, or not just space marine, obviously, but if there's any unit that wants to come into the middle and contest that objective, then they're going to get shot, fire and faded by that big unit.
Anyone shows their head, you just.
I definitely missed that quite a lot in the event. I had to do it with Riptide instead, which is not as good shooting actually. Riptide shooting is good, but not as good as a buffed up Crisis unit. So
it's the available options, I guess, because burst cannon, the iron blast, and the plasma rifle. It's it's a scary threat. Yeah, but it's against some lists, it's not going to turf out a whole unit. For example, against Terminators, Dark Angel Terminators, Permanent Transhuman, it's not reliably going to kill them. You want the Exemplar of the Monk card, the reroll wounds against the list like that. So so I think the main changes would be, I think I worked it out already actually. I worked out, nice.
I sort of went home, as you do after a tournament, I immediately started brainstorming.
Are you taking Are you going to the London Open?
I'm actually away at the time, but the rest of my brother and stuff is going. So,
is he an avid Tau player as well? So you can.
No, my brother's now an avid Eldar player. So,
right.
Yeah. But I definitely will try this at the next event. I'd go up to 2 units of breaches instead of a strike team and a breacher team. I'd drop a Coldstar for Farsight, and then I'd meld the 2 units of Crisis into one big unit. And doing that actually gives me a few points left over, because I wouldn't play a big 6-man unit. I'd play I think it's
5-man. Well, then you wouldn't have that movement issue as well if you have because 6 suddenly you open yourself up to so many other dangerous CP things going on. So,
and by dropping effectively one Crisis suit and dropping a few points for Commander Farsight, who's a lot cheaper than a Coldstar. It gives you a few extra points for some more shield drones for the big unit, because I normally play at least 3, maybe 4 shield drones.
Also
a few extra marker drones for the characters to give to the Riptides effectively.
Nice. I was playing around with adjusting your list to kind of things I'm more used to, and I think it's still possible to get a 5-man and then still throw a 3-man. But it's tricky, but because I think often I would throw on the stim injectors, the shield on the actual Chavray, all the little extra protectors, and I think the thing I found fascinating about yours was the ability to be like, no, let's take it all back, and that was really inspiring, because it's, again, as I said, it's like, no, we'll throw every single point we can imagine possible on this one unit. But obviously then when they die it really hurts.
I think that's fine to do. It makes you play a completely different way. And when you're playing these little 3-mans, they're very squishy. They die to anything. So you can't just kind of throw them away. Unlike the big unit, you can actually kind of boost forward quite a lot and sit in the middle with the defensive buffs they have. I mean, not to everything, obviously. They still die to some things, but yeah. So it kind of changed the game plan. I think, so that, to answer your question about what I would change, those are the changes I would make. I think things like the 3 Riptides, the 2 Devilfish with the breaches inside, are still you have to play those almost. The 3 Riptides against a lot of people is just too much to handle. And I think if you're playing 3 Riptides and this kind of list, and you're not just leaving your Riptides out in the open and getting shot and things like that, or mispositioning with them, then you can really comfortably at least get 3 wins at a tournament, because the Riptides, when piloted correctly, are just too hard to deal with. They're tough, they move a lot. But I remember back in the day when a Riptide had 6 inches of move, it was actually quite hard to get them to see things. Now that they've got 12 inches of move, they can get angles on things quite easily. I had opponents who would try and hide dreadnoughts and things like that, then they can just come around the side and whoop, with the iron and finish off that dreadnought. So that is the main thing, and I think I said this at the start, is the Riptides are still the main thing about the list, and playing them well, and the Devilfish as well. The rest of it is kind of supporting, and it kind of changes the game how you play those. But those are kind of my changes anyway.
That's great. I think I'm going to have to go out and grab myself another Devilfish. So
Well, I've got 6, so you're welcome. So,
I'll give you a call, borrow one, yeah. No, I see if I can convert my hammerheads. So they're all magnetized up anyway, so I'm sure that's possible.
that's why I have it. So yeah, I don't actually have 6 Devilfish. I've got 6 Skyway Hammerhead Devilfish, which are all magnetized too. Yeah.
Yeah, just magnetize that top part and you're done. You don't have to think about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Felix. I really appreciate this. And yeah, that's great.